Yeah. So what do you think it means to be a good man? What? But so it's really nice to meet you guys. I can give a little bit of background because I know we were just kind of an invite out into the ether webs, and you guys were so kind to follow up and give your time. So I'm Henry. I'm one of the team members on Under the Hood Talk. It's basically a team of five people who are all interested in discussing and breaking down masculinity and what does it mean to be a man and what does it mean to be a good man and how does society look at it and where do people learn their definitions of masculinity. And we're all part time, just thinks that there's not enough good conversation out there on the internet. And so we try and gather perspectives from all different corners in the hopes that we can save some of these clips and quotes from people, and then someone will see a story that they resonate with, be like, yes, that looks like me. That's something I can relate to, and it won't be everyone. But the more people we talk to and the more perspectives we gather, we think we're going to be able to build something that looks like a healthy version of masculinity. So that's our side. That's Under the Hood Talk. I'd love to hear why you both are interested. If there's anything you can share that would be helpful in kind of understanding that.
Yeah, so I think I reached out to Under the Hood Talk because I feel like our podcast, Eat Puff Love, is similar. We are attempting to change the dialogue around how people engage in the world around food, travel, cannabis, uh, sex, all of the other things. And I saw that we have a voice and we would like to be able to share our perspectives about masculinity and what that means to us.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And especially as two openly pansexual people, we are also very in touch with conversations around masculinity because we're having them all the time.
Yeah.
And defining what that means and evolving and what that means and breaking down experiences that we've had that have gotten us to this point of now like looking back and being like, oh, this is a part of my upbringing and this is, these are my experiences, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that breakdown is a key part of it. And what's interesting as I've been having these conversations is that the people who reach out to us, it almost self-selects to the people who are ready to break it down, right? Like in a place where, okay, this is where I'm at, this is who I am, and I'm in a place where I can talk about it and share about it. And so I'm so grateful I get to talk to the people who are in that stage because it's so great to hear like an informed perspective from someone who's like gotten to a place where they can be open and vulnerable and strong and share. So it's so great to be in my seat and talk to so many cool people. So I would love, so tell me more about Eat Puff Love. When did it start? What kind of conversations do you have?
Sure. So we co-host the podcast, which started a year ago, right?
About a year ago.
I'm Vybz.
I'm Growlr.
And we are as Growlr already said, we're a partnered pansexual I wouldn't use the word couple. I don't know how we would say it.
Yeah,
partnership.
Partnership.
And we were on a road trip last year, and we're like, we need to like take our conversations, all the things we like doing, and like put it in, package it some way, and share it because we have really great conversations together.
We have great conversations together, and like you were talking about how we were on a road trip, but this was like of many road trips that we take. Like we are always traveling, we're always seeing something new, we're always, our families joke and they say, oh, are you in the country? Because because we just enjoy traveling so much, and we were realizing that we were having all kinds of conversations with all different kinds of people,
right, and making these connections with people. And so that's where Eat Puff Love came from. It was just about how can we bring voice and awareness to people who are doing things in their communities, who are making changes, be them small or little, but just changing the narrative, right? Because the world, we live in a world that is narrated not by us all the time. So being able to bring those voices out into a space and be like, enjoy it and be proud of it and embrace it and also grow and journey. And that's what Eat Puff Love is all about. So we talk to people. Most recently, we had a friend of mine and also a sex therapist who was like very kink aware, body positive aware, cannabis aware. We had we have an upcoming episode with an author who is a Black queer identifying man who lived in New York in the 80s, early 90s, and wrote this whole book about that life and understanding.
We had some local folks.
Local people.
We just had owner of Pearl Rolling Paper Company, who is a young entrepreneur who's from the PG County area, but went down to Morehouse and got
into Denver and
is like traveling and all over the cannabis industry, and then like owners of small resorts in Caribbean islands, and
it's about love.
It's about
food.
It's about eating. It's about smoking weed, and it's about love, building love and community around those things, and with people that we meet along our journey.
But
I love that.
But doing it in a way that doesn't continue the dominant narrative.
Yeah,
because like people look at things and say, "Oh yeah, have a good time." But we're talking about people who are coming together and who are aware of, yes, this is how I show up in the world because I live in a world that's patriarchal. Or this is how I show up in the world because we do have to exist within capitalism. This is how we show up in the world, even though, we know supremacy exists. Like we are bringing that also into our conversation, but also having a good time talking about it.
Yeah.
And doing the work around
it. and building community. And I mean, those things like food, love, and cannabis, they kind of build the guardrails for like what kind of conversation you have inside them. And the conversation inside them can be really serious, talking about big things, but it's nice that it's always built with those tenets in mind that make it feel loving and safe and fun. And I think it's a good way to communicate serious topics as well, especially with putting it online. It can be hard if all of your content looks like a TED talk. People can scroll over it. But if if it's a little fun, you can kind of sneak in some tidbits. It reminds me, I one of the conversations that I had recently, also with a sex educator. She's a comedian and works in sex ed talks in like a really funny way. And it's a good way to catch some people who might be initially defensive off guard and then sneak in some learnings that they might not usually be receptive to. So I think it's an interesting tool to capture people who might not be like perfectly aligned with your opinion or audience, and kind of get them to lower their guard and maybe be like, listen and be like, huh, that's kind of an interesting idea that I hadn't thought about. So I think it can be a good technique.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that old saying, you catch more bees with honey than with, or something. I don't know how it goes. But anyway, it's like honey
sounds wise.
Yeah, it's wise. Whatever it is, it
sounds wise.
You gotta make people comfortable before you start dropping things on them.
Yeah, anyway, and what better way to make people comfortable than to pull out some food and some good energy, some good music, and a nice spliff going around the circle, and talk about cool things.
Yeah, I love that. I want to ask you guys, because we start off a lot of the under the hood talk with just like the stock questions, and they're not the most enlightened questions, but it starts off some good tangents. And so I would pose to you both, what does masculinity mean to you? and where did you learn it from?
Um,
Good.
I'll go first. So I I come from a very large family, with a lot of uncles, and a lot of aunts, um, and so my ideas around masculinity came from not just being around what they had done and what they had taught me, but also growing up in the religious setting, and then being indoctrinated to believe what masculinity was from that setting, um, and then being at this point in my life, having all of those experiences. um, I think the question is, what do I think is masculinity, and where does my masculinity come from?
Yeah.
I think I think that I think that my masculinity is ever evolving and my masculinity is ever fluid. And my ideas of what it means to be masculine could also portray socially as feminine. And but that doesn't mean that, I guess then the I'd be looking for like a scientific term to help gauge what that is, because outside of that, I just see myself as masculine and I see myself as feminine continuously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm thinking back to like I was always well, first of all, let me say I'm the child of a therapist. um and also grew up in a space that allowed me to be very emotionally aware. And so I still think that even in all of that, I was always seen amongst my peers at an early age and amongst my family as being like more needy of support, like emotional support. So I think that for me defined what masculine was, because I would always hear, "Oh, you got to toughen up," or "You have to be this way or be that way," but at the same time, still being coddled in a way that affirmed me being a male child, right?
Mhm.
Um, so it was always a confliction. So it was, yes, you should talk about your emotions, and you should also not. And so that somehow emotions equated masculinity, how much you were emotional depending on the situation. And so I think that's what how I defined it in my head. Um, until like Growler said, you get to a point where you're growing up and you have all these different experiences and come in contact with a slew of different people. And the idea of masculinity begins to change and shift depending on how you change and shift.
Mhm.
And I think that's what happened
Mm-hmm.
for me.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm getting the theme of like learning and evolving, and I think a theme I've heard too is like a generational shift. I mean, I know I've experienced in my family, and then also in conversations I've had where uh, growing up there's like a given definition, and then there's
Mm.
kind of a learned and evolving one that you get from going out in the world, and how gracefully you can accept that change and gain the knowledge is, I think, are one of the keys to like a healthy mindset around masculinity, and warring against that and fighting against that to try and stick to that learned one that you got all those years ago, I think can cause some friction. So I think that evolving is a really healthy component to masculinity.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's definitely a continued conversation with self. Because I always say, whatever you learned at childhood, which we kind of all did on different spectrums, we're all awash. You have to be in constant communication to be like, no, like I'm having this doubt about my masculinity or what I think is masculine, because I'm harkening back to some old way of thinking
Mhm.
and still wanting to try to like do that thing other than doing what I'm saying I want to do, is which is be my masculine self, my feminine self, my whatever self, and it show up however it shows up.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a constant conversation with self.
Yeah, it's a constant conversation because if you know, on the playground, I heard people say, boys don't hold hands. Or like, uh, "Ooh, you run like a girl," and then equating that to what I thought boys are supposed to do and like what masculinity means within the context of being a kid and then like growing up and then still having those uh messages be a part of who I grew up as, but then not enforcing that and believing that in my 2023 life. um but yeah, like the amount of internalized isms that we all have uh, been awashed with is crazy when you try to vet your current self against what you've been taught and indoctrinated into.
Hmm. And maybe an example would be helpful. Like if there's an audience member listening who is like working on that kind of back and forth, is there an example you can think of where somewhere in your life where you felt that conflict, like, oh, that isn't masculine, I shouldn't be doing this? What kind of conversation or check-in did you have with yourself to kind of take a step back and realize like, oh no, that's that is okay for me to portray that or represent that, and that's my authentic self, and I'm gonna carry on living my truth and not subscribe to something older? Is there an example or something that helped you kind of stay true to yourself, that could maybe help a follower in a similar position?
Well, I was just going to say, like, when you were talking about, and I think this goes to the question you're asking. For me, my day job, I'm an educator. My night job, we podcast. And I'm an elementary educator. And I always have to remember, like, when there are moments that pop up in the room, because kids say whatever they hear or whatever they think. They have no filters. It's
Right.
okay. It's just how the way it's supposed to be. Because there's learning opportunities in that. But when you hear like um any child say, "Oh, you run like a girl,"
Mm-hmm.
or or "That's so gay." I used to find myself not, even though I'm a black queer man, I used to find myself not like saying anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
But now, as soon as I hear it, I'm like, "Oh, no, hold up. Wait, we had to have this conversation. What do you mean? Like, what are you trying to say when you say they run like a girl, or oh, that's so gay?" I'm like, are these slurs? Like, what are we saying? That it's bad to be this thing? It's not okay to be this thing? And I think I have that conversation because I have to remind myself about that. So like that's the hard part, I think, to answer your question, is that like you find yourself like, I have to find a place where I'm okay with whatever it is. And the things that I'm not okay with, I always got to call it out,
Mm-hmm.
because I got to make myself comfortable with it, because I got to ensure that I know that it's okay to be a girl. It's okay to, whatever that means, to walk like a girl or talk like whatever. That's fine, because girls are awesome. Women are awesome. Okay, what? So I think for
Yeah,
me, that's what it is.
it's taking the shock value out of like, that's a bad thing. It's like, what are you doing? Like, what are you talking about? Like, I was gonna say, we were talking. I thought you were gonna say this. So I like to paint my fingernails, and that has nothing to do with my sexuality. It just has to do with I like to decorate myself, and that's fun for me. And
Big
so,
cock.
so I would paint my fingernail. I would paint my toenails, but I would never paint my fingernails because I didn't want a lot of questions, and I didn't want to have to, you know. And it wasn't even that I needed to do it for other people. It really was that I was legitimately late to work sometimes because I was removing polish from my fingers because I wanted to because I felt like there was I was losing a level of masculinity by by decorating my fingers. Um, and then I I started to do it one by one. I do a finger, I do two fingers, I do a design or something that was intentionally showy so that it again didn't feel normal. It didn't feel um but it really took me just like jumping out there one day and saying, I don't care. I this is something that's important to me. I like the way my hands look when they are very nicely manicured. That feels good to me. And then it turns out the people around me actually loved it as well. And the only and the only thing that was interesting, well, not the only thing, but there are many things that were interesting to me. What was very interesting to me was um, that this was not just attention I was getting from male identifying people. This was from female identifying people too. And so this idea that like now I am now less desirable to anybody is silly. It's really just um, it's just really all of the bullshit that you've been taught.
It's
That's
fear, isn't it?
yeah, it's taking place like in every moment now, and you have to like, oh no, hell no, like no, I still look good, like
Mhm.
you know, oh no, hell no, like
Mhm.
I am still strong and I am still confident, you know.
Yeah,
So
and I think it also represent. I mean, there's a few things in there. I think one theme is just like the symbols of masculinity have an important place in society, and so when you are either not displaying those symbols or displaying other symbols, they have I think, an outsized effect on people's perception of your masculinity. And then I think the other thing that you broke down is just like the strength it takes to like truly um, represent yourself, even if it's contrary to some of those traditional symbols. And I think the people around you who are in a healthy place can see that as a sign of strength. And that people in kind of an insecure position get afraid and can lash out. And they want you to represent those traditional symbols because it's more familiar, more comfortable, and doesn't run against what they're expecting. And so I think that is a powerful theme, is just what are the symbols of masculinity, why are they so important, and why is it so hard to not display them, and who around me isn't comfortable with untraditional symbols, because that's really like you said, your fingernails don't represent anything about your sexuality or masculinity. It's you like to paint your nails, and why is that so important? And I think it's such a powerful theme, and a lot of symbols I think are kind of anchors for guys with maybe not a strong sense of identity or security. It's like, okay, I'm this thing. I'm my truck and my my sport, and
Right.
picking some symbol like, okay, this is my anchor, right?
And that's what we were actually talking about a little earlier, is how we were comparing, and just in conversation between us, like, who are your closest friends? Are they cisgendered men or cisgendered women? And I was saying how most of my closest friends are cisgendered women. Because women most times are taught to be very emotionally intelligent, to express how they feel, to think about how other people are feeling. And being a cisgendered man, I was, but I grew up like with a mother and family members who who are mostly women, who were very communicable about what they thought, what they felt, and so I learned to be that way. So I feel that connection. But when I'm trying to like make those connections, not with all men, but like a lot of men, it's just like the aptitude, it just hasn't been built. So it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
so that then you become, our friendship is only based off of, oh yeah, our connection is we like this sport, or we like this car, or we like to do this, or we like to do that. And it doesn't dig down deeper than that, because we're told that
Mm-hmm.
we shouldn't go deeper than that into ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like,
Yeah.
no, it's time for us to like really do that work, because it, I really feel like everything depends upon men, all men doing that kind of work.
Yeah.
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 I totally agree. I mean, I think it's such an important connection to mental health because I think, like you said, I think women, their friendships can be based more strongly on emotional connections. And a lot of male friendships are based off experiences. Like we like these things, but it stays at the surface level. And that doesn't really make for enduring connections and friendships. And loneliness among men is so high right now. Like people need good friends they can rely upon, not just to go to the game or go to the bar or based on experiences, like actually having a close friend you can talk to combat loneliness really improves your mental health. And so it's just one of the key things. I'm so glad you brought it up for guys to learn is like it's okay to share your emotions, especially with other male identifying friends, coworkers, colleagues, so you can actually connect and build your community.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I
I mean,
agree.
and I think that's why this conversation is so important.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the first things that you said to me when you met me. You said that I have a lot of male identifying friends, and you said, but all of your male identifying friends are very emotionally connected with themselves, and they're huggers, and they are intimate talkers, and sometimes they're whisperers, and sometimes they are um yeah, and they tell each other they love each other all the time, and that's um the thing. But I also notice when people don't do that. And um yeah, I don't know how that's relevant, but that's what I've been thinking
No,
about.
it's relevant. I mean, like all humans want connection.
Connections. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that um that's right, because I do have some very close, like, these are my brothers. And so, with brothers, you share everything anyway, because it's like you're there. Hopefully that's the relationship. But just to say that, yeah, we as male people in a world that's very patriarchal just need to do a better job of like disconnecting from self and connecting to other people, and doing that more frequently than not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, I mean, I used to have this professor who would always say, she was like, "Oh, you have to stop your nipple, not your nipple, it's like your navel gazing,
Your navel
your
gaze.
navel gazing."
Navel
Oh,
gazing.
oh, you said
Wait,
this
what does
the
that
other
mean?
day. Navel
So
gazing.
navel
What?
gazing,
Yeah,
stop
unpack that, please.
recentering
I don't know what that
yourself.
means.
That could be an outtake. Sorry, I didn't mean to say nipple.
I need a glossary.
To
But she would
describe.
say that to be like, stop focusing on yourself all the time. It's not about you. Stop boosting
Oh.
your head, your ego. Like, look outside of yourself. There's a whole lot of things happening outside of you. And when you start to realize that, then you can start to position yourself in the world, and understand how you interact in it and the parts that you need to change so that the
Navel
world can
gazing.
also shift.
Navel gazing.
Navel gaze.
Navel gazing.
I
I like
just
that.
learned a thing.
That'll be the title of our talk. How to look up from your navel.
Navel gazing.
Navel gazing. I love that. Now that's the thing I learned today. No, I try and learn one new thing every day, and I think you just provided it.
You're welcome.
That's awesome. Well, I want to be cognizant of your time because I know I only budgeted 30 minutes from you both. So if there's a message you guys want to share to our community, or if there's like resources or a website or a book you both read recently, I would love to collaborate on how we share or cross post or send people over to your page as well. So any idea, we can do it now if you have any ideas, or over email, or get back on Zoom when I have my actual little studio, would be awesome. So just wanted to float that there.
Okay, well, you mean like just something to wrap up some kind of something? I don't have any connection to them, but speaking directly to Black men, Black men therapy is an outlet to find therapists who are familiar with men of color and their experiences. I would say, to everybody in the world, yeah, come follow us at Eat Puff Love. We're on Instagram.
Eat.puff.love on Instagram.
We're on all the social platforms for podcasts.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
What about you?
I was going to say, of course, follow the podcast. And then what else would I share?
Anything that I would share. I would say this also, lastly. I was told this. A lot of stuff happens to men in childhood and across the board. And we never really connect with our inner child. And I think that sometimes people just have to say to themselves, like, have the conversation with your inner child, because anytime you're feeling stressed out or feeling like you're not in control, it's probably because something that happened a long time ago that made you feel that way. And so it kind of creeps itself out. And so what I've learned over the last year is that the more you take care of your inner child and like affirm, its needs, which are your needs, like to feel loved, to feel respected. The more you do that, the more you grow in yourself, the more you become free to explore who you are as an individual in the world, and how your individual self connects to a greater world. And so I would just say, start to do that work.
Yeah.
And
surround yourself.
And it can't be done alone.
Yes, I was going to say.
With, support.
Find a community of people who also want to do that work. And sometimes the best way to find those people is to go find and do the stuff that you enjoy doing. Going for hikes, going for runs, going for jogs, going traveling.
And the kink community,
and the sex positive and kink communities and body positive communities, and find people who want to have the conversations that you want to have, and have those conversations with bravery and
road trips.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so
I love that.
From there, require the men around you to do the same. Invite folks over for a nice casserole. Invite folks over for, I don't know, a movie night.
For that knitting circle.
Look, let me tell you something. Having a night to watch a scary movie together and eat popcorn is fun. It's fun,
Yeah.
It's just
that's good advice, and it's simple formula: casserole, a joint, a movie, popcorn, good conversation.
Yes, like, why is anybody stressing about anything else? Let's have a pizza night.
That is good advice to the community. I really appreciate you both sharing your knowledge and your energy. It's really infectious. I feel lighter and energized. So I really appreciate you both and the work you're doing. And
absolutely. And always remember to eat puff love.
Amen. Amen.
Right.
Bye.
Yeah. So what do you think it means to be a good man?
I don't think there's a single definition.
Things that make up a good man are just things that make up a good person. Someone who's honest, someone who's decent,
you're also willing to express yourself in a healthy way, and you're in touch with your emotions as well.